Welcome to the Empowerment Show with Melissa Heisler. Every week, discover new personal choices with practical, inspiring guides. And now, here's Melissa.
Happy Tuesday, all, and welcome to the Empowerment Show. I'm Melissa Heisler, Empowerment Coach at It's My Life, and it is your life. Live it. Today, I will be talking to Dr. Lal-Tabak about a new take on mental and physical health. To join the conversation, you can post your questions at facebook.com/The Empowerment Show or twitter.com/Empowerment Show. So let me tell you about Dr. Lal-Tabak. She's an integrative and complementary mind-body physician who practiced Ayurveda, Vastu, homeopathy, and body-centered transpersonal psychiatry. She completed the honors program in medical education at Northwestern University in Chicago, Illinois, and did postgraduate training at UCLA, Northwestern University, Oregon Health Sciences University, Rush, University of Chicago, amongst many other places. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, I'm very excited to have you on today. We want to talk about mental and physical health. And I wanted to start by talking a little bit about how did you get your start in health and healing? Can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
Yeah, sure. I basically come from a family of physicians. So everyone in our family was an MD, was a doctor. And so at a very young age, I became a 6-year med at Northwestern University honors program in medical education. And I went through the usual route of medical school training, the undergraduate, the medical, and then I did go into psychiatry. And I really enjoyed people in systems. So I went to child and family psychiatry. And then I found that in my training, I was still feeling that people weren't really being helped as fully as they could be. So back in 1991, I went through this major transformation in my own health that happened during my fellowship in child and family psychiatry that led me down a more natural path of healing. And that long journey took me to where I am today, years later, practicing integrative medicine and psychiatry.
Can you share a little bit more about what happened in 1991, about your own health and your own transformation on how you looked at health?
Sure. So what happened was I ended up being in Oregon for a while, in Oregon Health Sciences University, after being at Northwestern and UCLA doing cross-cultural psychiatry there. And I found that, I was seeing a lot of kids and families, a lot of them with history of trauma and abuse and in the community, a really good training program. And yet my body wasn't quite happy with that. So I was under a lot of stress. And as you know, Oregon has less sunlight compared to other parts of the world. A lot of the seasonal affective disorder studies are out there in the Pacific Northwest. And it turned out that my immune system was affected by some of these stressors and factors and even the lack of sunlight, perhaps. And I ended up getting really sick. I ended up getting a virus. I think retrospectively it was a virus. And I ended up just getting actually quite disabled for a while. And I was put on 14 medications with lots of side effects. And I found that over time, I turned to natural approaches to help heal myself from these conditions that I had back then.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was just speaking to another guest the other day about how we try to take one prescription to help us with what we're currently going through. And it ends up that prescription causes side effects, which makes us take other medications to deal with the side effects. And it seems to get into, can be a very negative cycle.
Yeah, I did find that. And actually, for me, I was misdiagnosed. I think when we've spoken before, I mentioned how I was misdiagnosed by over 30 physicians. Some of them actually saw me physically. Some of them saw me and treated me in parts because there's so many subspecialties in medicine. And so I kind of gave up on doctors, even though I had a family and lots of friends who were doctors. I just went towards more natural ways. And initially, I actually was in a lot of pain. so I learned to do some meditation and mind-body techniques to help myself cope with the pain. And that journey led me down a path of learning about psychoneuroimmunology and homeopathy and eventually Ayurveda, and many other things. By the time I was finally diagnosed, like 13 months after my symptoms started, I decided not to start more medication because, once again, like you said, I knew there were many side effects of the medications I was being recommended, and I did not want to have more medications, for which then I would need others, and that's exactly how I got put on 14. Was one needed others, like you said, and it was like a spiral of just side effects. I didn't want that anymore, and eventually, eventually I came off all the medications, all 14 of them, and I was completely able to heal 4 conditions that they told me I'd have forever. By the time they were finally diagnosed, there were 4 conditions, so I completely healed naturally.
And that's so powerful. The body's ability to heal itself is given what it needs to heal. I think it's also very interesting you bring up about specialists, and I think it's really, there's amazing things that Western medicine is doing, and it's amazing what different medical specialists can do. But I think the negative aspect of that is that they're too polarized. They're looking at only one tiny slice of the human body, or the human psyche for that matter, and they're not seeing how everything works together. And having had my own medical issues as well, I think that's a very important point, is I go to this specialist and that specialist, and either they couldn't diagnose it because it wasn't their body part, or they would look at just curing this one little thing, but not see how the entire system was being affected by the illness.
Yes, there's definitely a place for acute Western medicine and places that Western medicine is fantastic. And yet there are places, I think, for more chronic conditions where we have to turn to our own inner wisdom and more natural ways, even nutritional ways of healing that are being honored actually more now in Western medicine as well. I keep track of this field called psychoneuroimmunology, mind-body medicine, and finally, I think now even doctors are learning about the mind-body connection and neuropeptides. And in my work, my business is called Heart of Transformation Wellness Institute, and it's because we teach people about the fact that the heart of transformation is really within us, that we inside have that innate ability to go to a deep place of healing, which I learned firsthand, but now I help a lot of people of all ages with that. And it's very rewarding work.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the mind-body connection, maybe in some layman's terms? I know you jumped into neuropeptides and everything, but maybe you can give us kind of a cursory glance into what that world is and how we can use it for our own health.
Definitely. Yeah. So basically what we find is that there really is no separation between the mind and the body. As you know, in Western medicine, things can be split apart either because of billing purposes or insurance code purposes, or just based on the training that the specialist or the doctor has. However, I find as a psychiatrist, I'm treating not only mental and emotional conditions, but I also work a lot with physical illness. Often there's a gut reaction or a gut condition that goes along with the intestinal health, that goes along with how the brain is working, which goes along with how the skin is working. So really, there's an inside-out degree of connection that a lot of people till now have not really honored. What I find is that back in 1991 and even as far back as 1970, there was a group of doctors and nurses and specialists and healers who came together at a conference on psychoneuroimmunology, and psycho meaning more mind, neuro meaning more body, immune meaning more immune system, and endocrinology is in there too. It can be called psychoneuroendoimmunology, PNEI or PNI for short. And I used to go to some conferences in Hilton Head where we all, talked together, attended seminars and presented on these topics where many different people of many specialties came together to share their wisdom, to share their journeys, and to share their scientific discoveries, really, of mind-body healing. I found that in order to look at the mind-body connection, we realized that this woman named Candace Pert, who was a researcher at the National Institute of Health, found these neuropeptides or receptors that connected to different protein molecules in our body. So, for example, when we said we had a gut feeling, we actually had a feeling in the gut. Like, it could be an anxious feeling, it could be a happy feeling, or when we had a broken heart, we actually had receptors in the heart where we would feel pain if something happened that was, sad, or if someone had died, something like that. Also, I found that in order to really honor the mind-body connection, people in psychoneuroimmunology were changing in many, many different aspects of their lives. So they were learning the relaxation response and using guided imagery, using mindfulness. They were also changing nutrition and exercise methods, whether it be aerobic or limbic. And people were, in addition to this, changing their nutrition. They were changing their sense of community and creativity. They were changing how they detoxed their bodies internally and externally. They were basically changing everything in their lives to get well in psychoneuroimmunology, or even in preventive TNI. In family practice departments, people were putting in programs for mind-body wellness in many places, including at Rush here at Northwestern as well. What I found was that as I got more into this field of mind-body medicine, 10 years later in 2000, 2001, I actually learned more about Ayurveda as well. Ayurveda is Indian medicine, and the Ayur means life, and the Veda means knowledge or wisdom. And it turned out that everything I had learned in psychoneuroimmunology and gotten completely well in the 5 years from 1991 to 1996, I actually found Ayurveda had done the same thing for 5,000 years. And by now, people were doing, physical healing and mental, emotional. They both were interconnected.
And I think that we're in an amazing time right now where we're finding a lot of things through our modern channels and our modern science that actually point us back to some ancient wisdoms that used to be there that we've ignored for too long, I think. And I think I love what you were talking about as far as I tend to be a mind person myself, and we often think about rational and, thinking for our mind, and our mind controls our body. And I think it's really powerful to know that there are receptors in our heart, there are receptors in our stomach, that there's other ways our body is both receiving and sending information, and to be in tune with that as we're looking at not only our health, but our entire life.
Definitely. There's actually this whole field now. You may have heard of epigenetics. Have you heard of it?
But maybe you can explain a little bit what that is.
Yes, that also includes the idea of mind-body medicine. Essentially, epigenetics is the latest as far as finding that even though we may have certain genetic predispositions or genetic memory or genetic coding in our cells, the expression of the genes is not always the same. So we can change through our choices in life, going beyond, or epi in that way, going beyond the genetics to change what happens in our bodies, how the genes are expressed. And when I look at what I did to get well, I think I changed everything in my life, and I changed the expression of the genes of how my body reacted to the virus that I got in 1991. So epigenetically, through my choices in health, I was able to change everything. And I think this is true for many, many conditions that we're told are genetic, that we have them.
I had not heard that aspect of it before. I know that I had heard, and I'll probably get the numbers wrong, but I think we change our entire body every 7 months, that we have new cells that are being born and died off, so that every 7 months we're almost a brand new person. Is that correct, or the right number?
I'm trying to remember. I think it might actually be 7 years.
Like every 7 years?
Yeah, every 7 years we change our entire body, every single cell. And I know that within 7 years is when I got completely well. And in Ayurveda and in psychoneuroimmunology, we say that it has to do with the mindset. Like, we think that, the mind, what comes first, the mind or the body? But actually, we change the expression of our genes in our body every moment. So I found that when I was very ill, I was doing guided imagery, which led me to have a different belief system of what was possible in my body. And I was doing it like 4 or 5 times a day. I would just play a tape or a CD, or I would, now you can just download things. And I was doing meditation of different kinds as well. So I found that I was transcending the physical state my body was in now to change my mindset. I also was challenging negative thoughts. And I was also finding that I was looking at emotional issues and clearing them through letting go of resentments and forgiveness type practices. And I was also journaling to let go of stress. So there were many things that I was doing both actively, internally, and externally. And I must say, one of the basic things that helped me was my innate ability to create. So I was doing my artwork. It turned out I was a visual artist that had been just, I was an art history, person who just loved going to the art institute. But I found that I was an artist myself, and I really enjoyed doing my visual art in order to heal as well. Eventually, it turns out I became a healing artist, which is why I really love my work today, because I can help children and adults and women who are pregnant and babies and grandmothers, and I help them creatively look at their health and resolve health and choose more natural choices for their own health and healing. It's very rewarding work.
I'm sure that it is, yes. And I love that you call it, that's your creative work now. And I think that's even a different mindset that so many medical practitioners have. They see it as such a hard, fast science, that it's either A or B, or you take this test and therefore you do this, where I tend to agree with you that it's much more of an art. I think we're all individuals, that every circumstance is different, and that there are many different ways to get to that healing, and there's different ways for each of us to adapt to it. So I think it's a beautiful thing that you call it an art form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about your practice? I know you touched on some of the things that you had done yourself to be able to, you said to change your genes. So we talked a little bit about that our cells change every 7 years. I'm always one thing to happen quicker, which is why I think I called it 7 months. But so our cells change every 7 years. What about, how do you actually change? Are you changing your DNA? Is that what you're saying that we're doing, or what's the difference between changing genes or changing cells?
You're actually changing the expression of your DNA. So, for example, like cornea, our eyes, we change over the cells in our eyes like every 24 hours. Like if you've had a corneal abrasion, sometimes you put a patch on it and it's healed in 24 hours. Our tongue and our gut, every single part of our body, every cell changes within a certain length of time. And some of the harder organs take a longer time, like the bones would be longer than the mucosa. So essentially, if you're able to change your mindset, you can also change the expression of certain aspects of your DNA. Now, I would say that I find that the most important thing here is really having a loving attitude towards yourself as a human being, because initially when I learned about psychoneuroimmunology, I thought that basically I wasn't ever able to or should get sick now because I had a different mindset. But that's not true. We're not talking about shame and blame. We're talking about if something happens in our lives, and many things can happen, that there are ways of changing the eventual expression of it. So we're saying that it's not that you'll never get sick because you're human. You're going to, be exposed to viruses and bacteria. You can have things happen, but you can change how things progress. Like let's say someone does get cancer, for example, and I see people with cancer. then, you can change different aspects of your life and your attitude as to how you cope with it, and also how things happen in your life. And some people do heal completely. Other people, heal, but they're not cured. And eventually we all are humans, so we actually die. So, it's not like you're going to be alive forever or anything like that. What I found, I guess, is that everything that helped me in my own process of recovery, I decided to train in. Mm-hmm. The only thing I did not train in was acupuncture. I wasn't really fond of needles. So acupressure is fine for me, and marma points, which are gentle sort of pressure points that are Ayurvedic, similar to acupressure, which is all based on the Chinese and Indian meridian system, or nadis, energy systems of the body. So at our office, we do practice, homeopathy, relaxation response, mindfulness, nutrition, looking at allergies, detoxification. We look at, having different workshops for Ayurveda as well as for mind-body medicine. Our latest specialty has been working with people who have multi-potentiality. What we're doing is we're looking at everyone's unique gifts that they bring to the world, and that we honor each person's creativity. We came to this work through actually Twice Exceptional education. Twice Exceptional are people who are called gifted but have differences in learning styles. So they might have learning disabilities or learning differences. And I find, as a psychiatrist, what I've seen is a lot of children and adults were never really found to have their strengths as much as what their weaknesses were. And they were often called psychiatric or anxious or depressed or had mood changes or ADD, ADHD, but actually they had differences in learning styles or learning disabilities or learning differences or multiple intelligences that weren't honored in our school systems. So I've found that as a child and family psychiatrist today, if I can help people change their lives through nutrition and healthy choices and changing the parents along with the kids, of course, because that's where it starts, you really can modify the amount of medications you need, even for these conditions that they say are biological, that you have them forever.
And I want to touch on that. I like that, being able to see people for what their gifts are, of what they are being able to bring to the table, versus trying to fit them into boxes. And I think that goes back to what you started to say about being diagnosed. And I think a lot of times when we're diagnosed, and I actually had this conversation with someone else this morning, is, sometimes it can be a relief. Oh my goodness, I have this, now I can treat X. And that's a beautiful thing. But unfortunately, so many times people are diagnosed and they really see it as, now I'm broken. Now I'm like, you're stuck with this thing, you're chained by this thing, and not seeing it as a source of knowledge and a source of empowerment. So to be able to take the knowledge of having these symptoms or, having this specific illness, and instead of having it be a restriction for yourself, having it be a starting point and a platform. And I think that also goes into the work that you're doing now, where so much of our school system and our society is all about labeling people and being able to put them into this box and that box, and you should be at this level at this age or what have you, and then all of a sudden we're stuck. And if instead we can explore that individual and see how their mind works, how it works differently, there's so much potential that we have as individuals and as a society if we start respecting these differences.
Definitely. I think as you're speaking, it's making me realize, when I told you I was actually misdiagnosed or not diagnosed for 13 months, and then I was finally given some labels, and it was a relief, because actually at the time I had been married to a psychoanalyst's son, so they were like telling me it was in my head, because the initial medications I was on, like steroids and opiates and anti-inflammatories, took away the physical symptoms. And it wasn't in my head. It turned out I had a very serious sort of autoimmune post-viral lupus-like condition. And I had maybe 9 of the 11 criteria for lupus. and all the symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. Plus, my mood was cycling because I was on opiates and steroids. So all the diagnoses that I was given back then, at first I was kind of glad because I knew it wasn't in my head, but then I had to let go of all the diagnoses to get well. And I think that is a crucial point because I found as a medical doctor, I had all this information available to me. Now on the internet, people have that information everywhere. But back then I would like open up my textbooks and I would look at all the different pathological symptoms of the conditions I was now given the diagnosis of. And I said, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I can't sit here and look at what is wrong or what could go wrong. And I ended up actually deciding to do the opposite. I ended up focusing on different ways of thinking. I actually went to a lot of really progressive, new thought kind of places. And as you said earlier, new thought is kind of like old wisdom. So I ended up going to Siddha yoga, meditation centers, and unity churches, and science of mind, and Bodhi Spiritual Center, which is currently, been in Chicago for 10 years now, similar to Agape in California. And I found that doing all these, but especially just looking at the basis of Ayurveda, it was very similar to the metaphysics of A Course in Miracles. So I ended up doing everything to change the fear of the illness and the belief that it was an illness into transforming into that it was a calling for love. It was a calling for change, a calling to heal, and a calling for transformation. And I was able to completely heal, but I had to let go of the diagnoses. I had to say, I'm not that. And, in our system, in our system, I just want to say, like, the kids that I see, we cannot get services in schools, we cannot get services unless you have a pathological label. And often kids are put on meds. And that's kind of a paradox. We cannot get insurance reimbursement, right, till we have a label. So we kind of have to work where society is at and still have the label, but let go of the label and let go of that we are beyond what we are told. And the kids that I see and the adults that I see, I do really work with that kind of phenomena that you're describing.
Yeah, that's really powerful too, that, one point is about wellness care and, that you have to be diagnosed, you need to have an illness in order to have the insurance company pay for your services, pay for the healing services that are needed. And then also that we are looking at almost insurance companies telling us what it is that we can work on, how we can work on it, how much is covered. I think it really restricts the amount of wellness care that we as individuals can have. And I think you're right, we have to work with the system as it is now, but I think it's so refreshing to have someone like yourself who can do that blend of ancient wisdom and modern science and modern psychology and blend those together to really see what a balanced human can be. So if somebody wants, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, and we're using so many more parts of our brain when we're doing this. We don't use a large percentage of our brain, as you may know. So, but we are really going into a different level of transformation and healing that's possible if we do allow ourselves to do it.
Absolutely. And if somebody wants to know more about you and how they can receive treatments to you and what kind of areas that you specialize, how can they find out?
Well, we do have a website. It's www.bodymindmedicine.com. And we have a Heart of Transformation Wellness Institute, and it's in Evanston, Illinois. We do work with people online. We work through Skype and email and phone, as well as in-person sessions. We have people throughout the world that we work with. We also do a wide variety of energy healing modalities, which actually can work long distance as well. They work remotely. So the things that we offer can be done in person, but they can also be done across continents and throughout the world, which is very rewarding as well. One thing I should say is that, we do find that the ancient practices in Ayurveda also include shamanic healing. And that's something you and I had talked about before. And we found that at least what happened with me was back in 1991, I had been such a fast person. I would say I'd been going so fast that I was a 6-year med at 16, finished med school when I was 22, and I got ill when I was 27. And I found that I did not know this at the time, but I actually had many parts of me that weren't present because I had been through many moves and many changes while I was growing up. I was a military brat from India, so to say. And so what I found was that one of the initial things that happened in 1993, 2 years after I got sick, was that I did have some soul retrievals done. And at our offices, we also do soul retrievals because I found that people can be in parts instead of being centered. So when we work with restoring balance and centered self, we need to also look at if there are some other ways of healing that have existed for as long as human beings have been around that could be helpful from the shamanic healing tradition. So we also do that at our office, soul retrievals and extractions, and those healing journeys can be very powerful as well. In fact, I don't believe I'd be sitting here talking to you the way I am today had I not been through those experiences when I was younger. So
and I'm glad. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I know that might be out there for many people. I have actually gone through some soul retrieval work myself. And I think it's really important, again, to work on all parts of us. So there's our physical body we can see. There's the physical body we can't see. There's the mind that we can see the effects of. And then maybe we can use different machinery to see how it's functioning. But then there's also this other, if we want to call it the energetic world, the spiritual world, whatever term works for you. But there's definitely this other side of us that also needs to be addressed. And I know that I do this in my own work as well, where there's a point where you can do talk therapy as much as you want. You can, send people to a nutritionist to help them. But then there's that point of no matter how much conscious work you do, there's something that doesn't go away. And there's many modalities like soul retrieval that can help work in that sphere.
Yeah, definitely. And actually what I found in medicine, this is interesting, that every different part, if we're not centered and we're in different parts of our personality, each of those parts has its own psychoneuroimmunology and its own biology. So I've worked with, for example, diabetes, juvenile onset diabetes adolescents. And what I found was within a second of remembering a traumatic memory, their blood sugar would change from like 400 to 70 or 70 to 400. And they've done blood tests to see how like the enactment of a different body state or a part can be shown in the psychoneuroimmunology of the person. And that's pretty incredible.
That's very powerful. And that goes to, and I love this, is that our body doesn't know what's real and what's fake. It knows only what we're telling it to. So it's kind of like when you have a dream and you wake yourself from a dream because it's so scary. Your body's reacting as if it's real. And so I can also see this with these parts of ourselves or this history that we've gone to, that when we start replaying those tapes of a hurt or a fear or things, that our body is going to react on a physiological level.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And that's, I think, really powerful as far as if you have a physical illness, to know that there's another part, another aspect, another self that is completely healthy and whole, even though this part may be struggling, and it may be a dissociated part that's trying to bring a message to us. And the body is very wise. It remembers everything. Even our ancestors' histories, it remembers. So we can heal very deeply in that regard.
And I think it's great. We'll end on that don't only think of your body as being sick, but what is the message that it's trying to get to us? And that there might be ways to find the healing and the relief that you're looking for through many different modalities and many different levels. So I want to thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge today. This has been an amazing conversation. And we're truly honored to have you on the show, Doctor.
Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for having me. It's been a pleasure knowing you and speaking with you today.
Join Melissa Heisler next week right here at The Empowerment Show. Join the conversation at facebook.com/The Empowerment Show or twitter.com/Empowerment Show.